and welcome back to our show. I'm your host, Uxla Khan, and today I'm joined by Professor Matthew Lebo and student guest Michael Koha. Our topic today is gun control. Welcome.
Thanks.
So my first question for you two is, why are guns so prevalent in American culture?
Americans have a long history with guns. They have had, at the beginning of American history, guns were just part of the necessity of living American life, of establishing new cities and new frontiers. And that's just stayed with American culture. It's unusual compared to other countries that it has remained such a huge part of the culture for so long. And it's, embedded in movies and television, and there's just guns everywhere, unlike other countries.
Yeah, what he says is interesting because I think film and media have an interesting impact on how prolific guns and gun culture is in America. Just for a topical example, if you've ever seen the film Thor Ragnarok, at the end, there's this scene that I remember being kind of disturbed by, where this character has to kill all these monster things, and instead of using magical weapons like every other character in the movie is using, it's sort of like he's dual wielding M16s, and the whole thing is framed as a very triumphantly American moment. And I think a big part of that is there are people in the country who think that guns and masculinity and power are all tied together. And that's part of a culture that's really hard to eat away at, because people want peace, but in a country where there's so many weapons, it's hard to at once have, peace, and at the other hand have, total proliferation of arms.
So do you think that Americans are ready to change gun laws?
Some are, and some aren't. And the political battles between those two sides are, as contentious as they've ever been. What the NRA has been good at a number of things. One is making a lot of legislators really dependent upon them, but what they've been even better at is making guns sort of a single issue for tens of millions of voters, that the NRA can point at someone's particular record, talk about what they will do with guns, and that millions of voters will respond to that. And that makes it very difficult to have any kind of progress on even things that most people agree on.
Yeah, that notion that Hillary wants to take your guns away, that was really big in terms of the propaganda that was being pushed on Facebook and other social media leading up to Trump's election. But Hillary Clinton never took a really strong stance on guns as part of her campaign, but it was very much used as a political tool leading up to Trump's election, and he himself has flip-flopped on the gun issue whenever convenient. Even as recently as following the Parkland shooting, he was in a room with congressional leaders sitting next to Dianne Feinstein and said some immensely progressive things about gun control that he himself claimed that he would want to put into place. And then within 48 hours, after meeting with leaders of the NRA in the White House, he had flip-flopped again.
So a little bit on the school shootings. It seems like they've really become an epidemic in America. Why?
I suppose that people see it on television. They see how much press a person does, and people with mental illness and grudges and hate and access to weapons decide that this is what they want to do to express themselves. And so you see a lot of them, and they follow similar patterns. And they will continue to happen, no matter how horrific they get. The federal government isn't making any steps. And that was an excellent point. I remember that. And the president is sitting around a table with members of the cabinet and members of the Senate, and he said some really progressive things about what might be done to prevent future school shootings. And then there were, other people in the room, Republicans in the room, who pulled him back from that and reminded him of, what his stance is supposed to be.
And it's interesting to note, right now, in Robert Mueller's investigation with Russian ties, the NRA is under a microscope for politically influencing Congress and the American people using weaponized speech and types of, policy sales that just don't really amount to anything other than fear. The NRA wants to use fear of your rights being violated to sort of erode your other rights. I mean, the second, what he said about the Second Amendment being a single issue vote for so many Americans. I mean, Trump himself has even said, maybe those Second Amendment people will take care of some sort of trouble issue population. He actively encourages the threat of weapons and violence against Americans by other Americans because he wants them to be afraid that their rights are going to be infringed upon. And I think that is itself one of the most concerning things, is that the Second Amendment has, to many people, become the only amendment worth defending, and others can go in its stead.
That's an excellent point. So, do you think that these shootings and this mass shootings are stemming from mental illness, or do you think they're coming from poor gun control?
Well, it's both. I mean, the people who commit these crimes are, many of them suffer from mental illness. I suppose some of them don't. But there's people with these issues in every country in the world, but some of them can go home and find an AR-15 in their parents' closet, and in other countries, some of them, they can't. So the laws, when we talk about, the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, these people want to come and take away your guns. Well, some guns are going to be well protected by the Second Amendment and by the courts, but those incredibly powerful AR-15s and other guns like that, having access to that gun means that everybody has access to that gun, and it means that it becomes available to people who want to inflict as much damage as they possibly can. So, I mean, mental illness is not an American problem. It's everywhere. But you don't see these school shootings everywhere because other countries have put laws in place that make it so that if some student or some adult is very angry and wants to go inflict harm on a person, the weapons they can choose from are much, much more limited.
Yes, and I think another part of it is that what you mentioned before about the NRA sort of capturing certain Congress people and making it one of the issues that they need to highly focus on is that it sort of acts as a form of regulatory capture, where because of the fact that there are so many shootings, you would expect, members of Congress to react more, to the American people to react more. But 20 years out from Columbine, school shootings have become such a norm that it's almost like people roll their eyes and don't even think about it anymore because they don't want to think about it. And, even after that mass shooting in Las Vegas, there's a great photo of the window that was shattered by the shooter. And in the distance is Air Force One taking off from Las Vegas, leaving after the president visited the area where the shooting happened. And the only real action that was taken in response to that, which was the most deadly shooting in, I think, the history of the country, was that bump stocks were regulated, which only allow semi-automatic weapons to sort of become automatic weapons. And then in other situations, you just hear one thing over and over again: don't politicize tragedy. But other tragedies that don't involve guns, they get politicized all the time. It's that you have a Republican majority in Congress that wants to make the emotional response to shootings part of the problem, and there's a population of voters that will allow that and even thrive on it.
Well, this has been really insightful. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you both for being on the show.
Thanks.
And make sure you join us next week.
Thank you.